This video is brought to you by Squarespace. The Last of Us Season 2 was a huge disappointment. I was really curious how they were going to adapt The Last of Us Part 2, especially since it's such a divisive game, but even with the nature of the game, fans and critics of The Last of Us Part 2 seemed disappointed with Season 2 of the HBO show. So what went wrong? How did a show with a nearly universally loved Season 1 put out such a disappointing Season 2? I could just go episode by episode and break down the problems with each one, but what I want to do is dive deep into the three main reasons why The Last of Us Season 2 struggled. And the first main reason is without question the biggest reason for the season's pitfalls, and that's Ellie. Most people have already pointed out that Ellie is the biggest problem with the season, and they're not wrong. I don't mean to pile on the hate this girl has already received, but her portrayal of the character needs to be discussed. Bella Ramsey was able to portray Ellie in Season 1 effectively because Ellie's characteristics played into Bella's strengths. Ellie was a goofy and immature kid in Season 1 who had some deep-rooted trauma. Bella can portray this well. She did it in Season 1. Season 2, on the other hand, is a much darker story. I'm only going to reference the parts of the game that were adapted into Season 2, so there won't be spoilers for the rest of the game. The Last of Us Part 2 is really depressing. It's about this girl who essentially lost her father and is driven by so much pain to get revenge. Throughout this portion of the game, Ellie doesn't just lose Joel, but herself as well. This descent into darkness is a huge part of Ellie's story. This is a hard character to play, and unfortunately Bella Ramsey simply cannot portray that descent into darkness. Now, it's not all entirely on her shoulders. I would argue that most of it is actually the writer's fault because they did Bella Ramsey no favors. For one, it almost seems like the writers tried to lighten the tone of the story compared to the game. I'm not sure why they did this. If you're gonna adapt a story as depressing as The Last of Us Part 2, then commit to it. Don't try to lighten it. Now, more importantly, the writers made Ellie an incompetent, unlikable, and bratty character. It's hard to be invested into a character's descent into darkness when said character is so unlikable. Let's break this all down. So the season begins, and 5 years have passed since the first season. Ellie now acts like a bratty and angry teenager. She feels entitled to things she doesn't deserve. This is the easiest way to make someone unlikable. Now, you may argue that Ellie's a teenager, and it makes sense she acts like this. Alright, fine. Guess what? She's still unlikable. Whether it makes sense or not is not the point. The writers also made the decision to conceal information from the viewer. We just saw Joel lie to Ellie in the first scene of the season. Then off-screen, Ellie learns the truth, but we don't find out Ellie learned the truth until the 5th episode. So watching these first 2 episodes, her treatment of Joel makes her seem like a brat. There's a way you can portray frustration without being bratty, but Bella Ramsey can't do that. In the second episode, Joel dies and Ellie watches. The next episode begins with a 3-month time jump. And boy, do I hate when stories do this. Why are the writers robbing us of the opportunity to bond with these characters during their lowest point? Moments of trauma give the viewers maybe the best chance at empathizing with said characters, but all we get is one screaming scene and boom, 3 months later. It also robs us of seeing Ellie's earliest moments of her descent into darkness. Instead, it just happens off screen. Now, I could forgive the time jump if afterwards we see that Ellie is a noticeably different person. The writers had the chance to do this. In the first 2 episodes, we see Ellie is still kind of goofy. We especially see this in the first episode when she and Dina are on patrol. This is great. It makes sense to show Ellie goofy here because you want to contrast that with who Ellie is going to become. But the show doesn't do this. Ellie is just as goofy as she was before Joel died. She's making jokes with Dina and they're talking about how good their kiss was. Ellie is supposed to be a girl hell-bent on revenge and riddled with guilt, not a girl who's gushing about another girl she kissed. This is an underrated aspect of why so many people dislike Ellie. We just saw Joel die an episode ago and we're pissed. Ellie, however, doesn't seem pissed. At times, it feels like she doesn't even care. Of course, there are allowed to be moments of levity, but I feel like the point of these scenes should be to show how much Ellie has changed. Like, have Dina make a dad joke and Ellie doesn't laugh. That would be the perfect way to show how damaged she is, but the writers don't do do that. Another consequence of this time jump is that it robs us of seeing the aftermath of the Battle of Jackson. As it stands, the battle was really well done and entertaining, but it was kind of pointless. Like, what are the lasting impacts of the battle on the rest of the story? It seems like the only reason the battle existed was so the council could decline Ellie's request to go after Abby. The town needs to focus on fixing itself, so they can't afford to send a squad to Seattle. Makes sense. But there was a major missed opportunity here. In these first 2 episodes, we see how close Ellie has gotten with the people of Jackson. Yeah, she doesn't like that homophobe, but she gets along with mostly everyone else. Say the battle happens and Joel dies. Afterwards, while the entire town is trying to cope with all the death and destruction, we can see that Ellie doesn't care. She's only focused on Joel's death and the woman who killed him. I think seeing a little bit of that selfishness from Ellie could have done wonders for the character, especially if she was an important member of the community, but none of that happens. 3 months pass, Ellie is still goofy and bratty, and she leaves with Dina. This string of 3 episodes, 3, 4, and 5, are the weakest of the season. It's not until the end of the 5th episode where we get any inkling of Ellie's descent into darkness. Not once throughout episodes 3, 4, and most of 5 do we see Ellie struggle with this. As I mentioned before, I don't know if they did this because they wanted the tone to be lighter. I don't know if they did this because they forgot to do it, or maybe the writers did intend on this, but Bella Ramsey simply cannot portray that characteristic of Ellie. Now, besides that, these episodes highlight what I honestly feel is the biggest mistake they made with Ellie. It's not that she's unlikable or that she's too goofy, but that she's wildly incompetent. For some reason, the season repeatedly goes out of its way to show how immature or incompetent Ellie is. In the first episode, they have her struggle to fight one stalker. That happens after she falls through the floor and almost gets hurt. In the episodes after Joel's death, they repeatedly show that Dina is the brains of the mission and not Ellie. Ellie was going to walk straight into the WLF's base. She's the one who doesn't know how to triangulate a map. She's the one who looks like a terrified child while escaping from the zombies. She needed to be told not to fire her gun willy-nilly. When she and Dina are making their way through one of these buildings, they would have been killed if not for Jesse. She was also the one who crashed her boat right after driving it through a rainstorm at night. Half the time, she doesn't even act like she's in an apocalypse, like making loud noises going through tanks and buildings. Aren't zombies supposed to be around? Why are you playing a guitar in front of a hole in the building? In episode 4, Ellie learns that Dina is pregnant. Any normal person would be kind of pissed. I don't want to go on a life-threatening quest with a girl who's pregnant, but how do Ellie and Dina react? By having sex. Also, repeatedly throughout the season, we see that Ellie can only escape situations if she is saved by someone or something else. Jesse has to save her. She only escaped from the WLF because a bunch of infected attacked. In the finale, she only escapes from the Seraphites because the WLF attacked. I honestly can't think of a single instance where they showed her to be competent. You'd be surprised how invested a viewer can be in a character simply based on their competence. It would be one thing if we knew Ellie was competent, but she starts to make mistakes because she's so focused on Abby. But that's not what the story tells us. The writers repeatedly show that more often than not, Ellie has no clue what she's doing and she needs others to tell her what to do. This is such a stark contrast from the Ellie in the game, who by the way goes on to murder hundreds of people and can more than handle herself. These instances of incompetence are even more jarring when you realize the writers make an effort to show how competent everyone else is. Dina multiple times is shown to be the brains of the relationship, as I said. She tells Ellie what to do, and she plans each of their little missions. Jesse is maybe the most competent of them all. He and Tommy were able to find Ellie and Dina without knowing specifically where they were. Jesse was also able to figure out Dina was pregnant relatively easily. Also, Jesse is the one constantly preventing Ellie from making brain-dead decisions. And we've already seen how competent Tommy is during the Battle of Jackson. It's amazing how the finale has like 5 different scenes that make us like Jesse more than Ellie. Jesse is shown to be selfless while Ellie is shown to be selfish. Ellie also has the gall to criticize Jesse for thinking he's better than her, which he is. Ellie was going to die if she tried to save that one Seraphite kid, but Jesse was there to stop her. On top of the building, Jesse is shown to put others before himself when Ellie screams "F the community." This whole season and the writing decisions decisions the writers made involving Ellie's competence is so jarring. Now, before we get to the finale, we need to talk about the flashback episode. This is actually one of the few good episodes of the season. It has an actual through line about Joel and what it means to be a father. And the acting in this episode was phenomenal. I'll get to the big problem with this episode in a second, but when it pertains to Ellie, the arc again just highlights how Ellie hasn't really changed all that much. In episode 5, we start to see how dark Ellie's becoming with her killing Nora. So episode 6 should remind us who Ellie once was before Joel died. And then episode 7 should go back to that miserable Ellie who is pondering the decisions she's made. But episode 7 is the first time Ellie feels different, not episode 5. The other thing that really bothered me about episode 6 was that Ellie learns the truth right before she tells Joel she'll try to forgive him. It feels way too sudden. In the game, Joel tells Ellie the truth years before the porch scene. It gives Ellie a reason to be mad at Joel all these years and eventually muster the courage to try and forgive him. But in the show, Ellie just suspects the truth and that's why she's so mad. And then when she learns the truth, she's pissed for like 30 seconds and then she says she wants to try and forgive him. It just doesn't hit on the same level. Now with the finale, even though she's noticeably less goofy, I still wouldn't say that Ellie is properly conveying that trauma here. She just feels a little guilty and frankly wishy-washy. It's like she goes back and forth between wanting to go home and then wanting to confront Abby and then wanting to go home again to confronting Abby. There's a version of this where it works, where Ellie wants to leave after the terrible things she's done, but she just feels so compelled to keep going after Abby, almost as if she has no choice. She's already done these terrible things, and if she doesn't even kill Abby, then what was the point? This is entirely on the actor to portray that. And again, unfortunately, Bella Ramsey can't portray this. I thought a great opportunity to slightly show how Ellie has changed could have been when she tells the truth about Joel to Dina. So this whole adventure, Dina is committed to helping Ellie get justice. But after Ellie tells Dina what Joel really did to the Fireflies, Dina no longer feels like it's worth it because Joel frankly did a terrible thing. The way this scene plays out, I'm not exactly sure why Ellie is telling Dina this now. Did Nora mentioning Abby's dad make Ellie feel guilty and want to confess to Dina? Maybe. What they could have done here is use this opportunity to highlight that Ellie has been lying to Dina all season. Maybe before they even leave Jackson, Dina can ask Ellie why Abby came and killed Joel. Ellie could then lie to Dina and make up some story about the Fireflies. For one, it would mirror exactly what Joel did by lying to Ellie, which could have been a nice bit of poetry, but also it could highlight that Ellie knows what Abby did was justified. Ellie doesn't need to hear a monologue from Abby to know that they hunted him down because of what he did to the Fireflies. The thing is, Ellie doesn't really care if Abby is justified or not. She just wants revenge, and lying to Dina about the truth can make things easier. So at the end of the season, when Ellie does end up telling Dina the truth, it could drive a wedge in their relationship. Dina could be pissed that Ellie didn't tell her this sooner, and this would highlight the negative effect this quest is having on Ellie's life. I think it's a nice little rewrite that gives more weight to an otherwise fine scene. I'm not the only one who's pointed out how the change to Mel's death diminishes Ellie's story. It's so funny because it reminds me of a similar problem with the second season of another HBO show, House of the Dragon. For some reason, House of the Dragon was so hell-bent on whitewashing its characters. What does this mean? Well, it turns out a lot of characters don't actually do terrible things. It's just entirely a misunderstanding or an accident. With Ellie in the games, she fights and kills Mel, only to realize afterwards that Mel was pregnant. In the show, Owen grabs a gun, threatens to shoot Ellie, so Ellie shoots him and accidentally shoots Mel in the process. It's true that in both versions, Ellie didn't intend on killing a pregnant woman, but in the games, her bloodlust resulted in her killing a woman she didn't realize was pregnant. In the show, she just accidentally shot a pregnant woman after someone tried to shoot her. It's just not the same. Why are the writers trying to whitewash what Ellie did? Let the character do a terrible thing and have said character deal with the consequences. It's so frustrating. We get to the end of the season, and Ellie doesn't even have a complete arc. It appears she was ready to go back to Jackson because she killed a pregnant woman, but Abby intervenes, and that's that. The season is over. I don't need Ellie to go through an entire arc this season. I get that her story is supposed to play out over multiple seasons, but I would have liked this season to be a full chapter in Ellie's story, while in reality we are just cut off right through a chapter. If anything, the season appeared to already spoil the theme of Ellie's arc. In the third episode, the entire council scene was to point out how bad revenge is. Why are random characters telling us this? Shouldn't Ellie's story tell us this? In season 3 or 4, I guess we'll be told this lesson again. I frankly don't have much interest in seeing the rest of Ellie's story. I'll watch it because I'm curious, but for a cliffhanger, I'm not dying to see what happens next. Ellie's story was really disappointing, and it dragged down the entire season. Now, before continuing on with the rest of this video, only 18.2% of viewers are subscribed to this channel. So if you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Thank you. I want to talk about Abby and her storyline next because my issues here are entirely different. I don't have many issues with any of the scenes with Abby, her friends, the WLF, or the Seraphites. My issues largely stem with the fact that we are getting these scenes at this point in the story. The order in which you reveal information to the audience absolutely matters. Imagine in The Empire Strikes Back if we learned that Vader was Luke's father when Vader was talking to the Emperor. The whole reveal at the end of the movie would be a million times worse. But because we learn the truth at the same time as Luke, the scene is really powerful. In the game, when Joel dies, you don't know Abby's motivations yet. She shows up, she tells Joel to guess who she is, Joel says nothing, and then she beats him to death. In the show, she obviously monologues for like 7 whole minutes before she really starts to beat him up. I feel like it would have really benefited the story if we learned nothing about Abby until the story switches to her perspective. I want to hate Abby when she kills Joel. I want to be put in Ellie's shoes. I want to feel that rage and anger at what just happened. Maybe this is just me, but because I know the truth about what happened to Abby and her father, I don't hate her for it at all. I get it. That doesn't mean I wanted Joel to die. It just means I don't blame Abby for what she did. As a result of this, there is a disconnect between myself, the viewer, and the main character. I'm not as angry as Ellie because I get where Abby is coming from. So does the knowledge of Abby's motivation change the scene? Absolutely. There's also the peculiar decision the writers made to have 3 separate scenes where characters monologue the truth behind Abby's motivation. There's the literal first scene in the season, then there's Joel's death scene, and then there's Nor telling Ellie. This is something you want to avoid in storytelling, revealing the same information to the audience multiple times, because it feels like a waste of time. The reveal to Ellie could have worked if Ellie didn't know the truth, because even though we the audience already know this information, the scene would be more about Ellie's reaction to the information rather than said information. But Ellie does know the truth, and if she didn't know the truth, that would change the entire story, so I wouldn't want that anyway. So I don't love how they presented this information with Abby. I thought it was clunky and frankly changed my perspective on the story. Another decision the writers made with these characters is they get us to sympathize with Abby's friends. We see them cringe and even cry at what Abby is doing to Joel. I would have preferred to have this reveal after the perspective change at the end of this season. Again, throughout this entire season, I want to be on Ellie's side 100%. I want to cheer her on when she's killing all of Abby's friends. And then when the perspective changes and we learn that these people aren't bad people, that's when I start to question what Ellie is doing. But again, similarly to Abby, I kind of feel bad for them and I'm already not on board with Ellie. What's the point of the story switching to Abby's perspective when I already empathize with her and all her friends? I guess we'll just have to wait 2 years to find out. Another thing I want to point out, but I'll have to wait until season 3 to confirm this, is that since we have already gotten Abby's backstory, when the perspective changes, it's going to pick up on Seattle Day 1. At least that's the implication. If we knew nothing about Abby when the perspective changed, it would allow us to go further back in Abby's story. We could see Abby and her father's relationship and how close they were. And then we could see how devastated she was to find out that her dad was killed. Show, don't tell. Let me feel that pain that Abby feels rather than just telling us that she's in pain. But since we already know Abby's motivations, having scenes like this play out in season 3 feels redundant. That's a missed opportunity. One last thing before we move on, I feel like we should not get any scenes from the WLF or the Seraphite's perspective until the perspective changes. I should be focused on Ellie's story right now. I don't care that Isaac is wondering where Abby is. That is something I'll care about once the story switches to Abby's perspective. It's a minor thing, but it bugged me. I'm curious to see how season 3 is going to develop Abby's story when I feel like I already know so much. Yes, I know the story of the game, so I know there is more story to tell. I just wonder if it could have been done more effectively, and I feel like it could have. Now, before we talk about the peculiar structure of the season, I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for anyone who wants to stand out online or start a business. Whether you're a content creator like me or someone who wishes to start their own movie blog, Squarespace is perfect for you. If you sign up today, you can use Blueprint AI to get a fully custom website in just a few steps. Squarespace also offers a complete library of professionally designed and award-winning website templates, so you can use it to build your own beautiful page that will capture your audience in a way that only you can. If you're looking to build your own store because you're passionate about a product you wish to sell or have a wonderful idea, you can use Squarespace Payments to manage all your earnings in one place. You can set a variety of different prices, tiers, and paywalls, all of that. Pretty much anything that will give your customers their best value. If you're a YouTuber and you wish to upload special behind-the-scenes videos or extended videos, you can do that as well. Create your own Squarespace domain with no hidden fees or add-ons required. Don't wait, invest in your dream domain today. Head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/thegoldman to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Again, that's squarespace.com/thegoldman to save 10% off your first purchase. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now, the last main point we need to discuss is the structure of the season. In particular, two things. The first is related to the flashback episode. I stated before that for the most part, I felt like it was a well-written episode, but for the life of me, I don't understand why this wasn't the first episode of the season. Maybe this has to do with most of these scenes being actual flashbacks in the game, but the season benefits immensely if most of this episode is just the first episode of the season. I already stated how it affects Ellie. Since we don't know she knows the truth about Salt Lake in the first episode, it makes her dynamic with Joel really confusing. Why is she mad at him? What happened between these two? Sure, you could assume that she knows the truth, but why leave it up to assumption in the first place? Also, having the previous season end with Joel finally opening up to Ellie, and then having this episode begin with their relationship strained doesn't feel right. There's also the whole Eugene storyline. I thought the scene in the flashback episode was excellent. It shows us perfectly what kind of person Joel is, and why Ellie would be so mad at him for breaking a promise, especially after he blatantly lied to a grieving widow. But again, why does this have to be some sort of mystery throughout most of the season? While I was watching the initial therapy scene where Eugene is first mentioned, I thought I just forgot something that happened in the first season. Usually when a story is keeping information from the audience, it's because the reveal of that information will have lasting consequences on the story, and usually a character in said story is not privy to this information. But none of this applies to the Eugene storyline in this season of The Last of Us. In the first episode, everyone knows what happened to Eugene besides the audience. Joel knows, Gail knows, and Ellie knows. When we find out what really happened in episode 6, yeah, it's a powerful scene, but is it going to have any lasting impact on the story? No. I would bet that for the rest of the series, Eugene is never mentioned again. So why have this storyline be a mystery in the first place? It really feels like so many things were left a mystery to the audience just because the writers wanted the viewers to be interested in those answers later on. Why was Ellie mad at Joel? Oh, we learned that she found out the truth. This is audience manipulation because the writers are only withholding information from the viewers so they can keep watching, not because it benefits the story. Now, this flashback episode also just perfectly works as a season premiere. The slow degradation of Joel and Ellie's relationship makes for a fantastic first episode. Say this is the first episode of the season, and instead of Joel telling Ellie the truth on the porch, Ellie forces Joel to tell the truth after the Eugene situation. The episode ends with Ellie being furious at Joel. That would be a perfect bookend to the episode, beginning with the final scene of season 1. You don't even need to tease Abby. The tension between these two is enough to keep me invested for the next few episodes. Beginning the season showing how close these two are, then showing how their relationship is strained, then having Joel die, I think is a much more tragic story than the season just beginning with their relationship strained. Now, besides all that, the real issue I have with this flashback episode is that it devotes time to feature a character who just died. But Goldman, you love Andor. We know he dies, so I get invested. There's a difference between a prequel and a flashback episode. Prequels are fine because there is obviously obviously more to a story than the death of a character. In a singular flashback episode like this one, I don't care to see development for a character that just died. More importantly, a character we will likely not see again for the rest of the series. Pedro Pascal is an A-list actor now. There's no way he's gonna be brought back again and again on a regular basis. He's too expensive. I bet you we don't see Joel at all in season 3, and maybe we'll see him in one flashback scene in season 4. So giving a dead character development only serves to stall the story the season is actually trying to tell, and that's Ellie's descent into darkness. So I was incredibly disappointed that such a good episode was wasted as a flashback. The other part of this episode that I don't love is the porch scene. Again, another example of an excellent scene entirely misplaced. For those of you who don't know, this scene on the porch is one of the last scenes of the game. I won't say what happens at the end of the game, but this scene changes a lot of the story. Without this scene, we're under the impression that the last moment Ellie and Joel shared together before Joel died was Ellie berating him at the New Year's party. But after the porch scene, it recontextualizes a lot. She's not just after revenge because Joel was killed, she was also robbed of the opportunity to forgive Joel and heal that relationship. Joel took away Ellie's power by saving her from the Fireflies, and Abby took away Ellie's power by robbing her of a chance to forgive Joel. Ellie saying, "I don't think I can forgive you, but I'd like to try," adds so many layers to the story. In The Last of Us Season 2, for some reason this critical scene is placed in a flashback episode just after Ellie kills Nora. What's the point of that? I bet you by the time the series finale rolls in Season 4, the episode where this scene should take place in, most people are going to forget about it entirely. I cannot emphasize this enough. The order in which you tell your story is nearly just as important as the story itself. Now, we likely know why this scene was placed here. I already said it. HBO probably doesn't want to pay Pedro in the future for one scene. This entire episode, while well done, was such a disappointment. Now, the other part of the structure of the season that we need to talk about is how The Last of Us Part 2 is being adapted. Season 1 was a 9-episode adaptation of the entirety of the first Last of Us game, and it was excellent. With The Last of Us Part 2, HBO already wants to adapt this divisive game into 3 seasons, each season presumably being 7 episodes. There is so much wrong with this. 7 episodes is too short for a season. It's pathetic. I hate with a passion that modern streaming has such short seasons. This is barely long-form storytelling. The more important issue is how HBO is treating seasons as a whole. A season of television is not supposed to be the amount of episodes you can film at a time with a certain budget. A season should be its own story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. Of course, a season can be a part of a wider story, but again, each season should still be its own story, its own arc in the wider narrative. So since The Last of Us Part 2 is being adapted into 3 seasons, that means twice HBO's The Last of Us is ending a season at an inorganic part of the story. I don't care that season 2 ended with Ellie's perspective and season 3 is going to begin with Abby's perspective. Season 2 didn't wrap up any story. Ellie had no arc, no learned lesson, nothing. All we got is a cliffhanger that will be resolved in the next season. A lot of people are going to check out. It's one thing to have this cliffhanger and right away be able to continue the story like the games, but with the HBO show, we're going to have to likely wait 2 years to get the conclusion to a cliffhanger to a story a lot of people are not interested in anymore. 2 years is a long time, and modern streaming needs to figure this out. But Goldman, you loved Andor Season 2, and that came out more than 2.5 years after Season 1. That's fair, and Disney shouldn't be let off the hook for that. But Andor Season 1 was a complete story. It didn't end on a cliffhanger, so I wasn't pissed waiting for Season 2. Was anyone pissed off that Season 2 of The Last of Us came out 2 years after Season 1? No, because Season 1 was a complete story. Now, what's even worse about this is that because Season 3 is going to be from Abby's perspective, it is entirely possible that we don't get any meaningful development for Ellie until Season 4. At this rate, that could be in 4 years. I'm gonna be 30. This is a big problem. HBO should have learned from House of the Dragon the importance of ending a season properly. Spoilers, by the way, Season 1 ended with a cliffhanger, but it was an excellent cliffhanger. We saw something big happen, and now we want to know the consequences consequences of that. That's a good cliffhanger. Season 2 also ended with a cliffhanger, except the cliffhanger was just teasing an upcoming event. Nothing happened but teasing. That's a bad cliffhanger, and Game of Thrones fans were pissed. There's a reason the season 2 finale is the lowest rated episode of House of the Dragon. The Last of Us writers kind of shot themselves in the foot here, because the right way to do this cliffhanger would be to actually have the scene play out and end the season after this confrontation ends. But if you do that, then having the next season be the events from Abby's perspective is kind of pointless. So the only way to properly play this out is by it not being a season finale. You could have easily told this 7-episode season in 6 episodes, and then have 4 more episodes from Abby's perspective until we get back to this confrontation, and boom, you have a 10-episode season, aka a proper season of television. But no, HBO needs to milk The Last of Us for 4 seasons so they can make more money. Pathetic. I have grown a newfound respect for shows that end after 2 or 3 seasons, because they leave us wanting more, while other shows like The Last of Us will likely drag on for too long. When HBO adapts Harry Potter, at this rate, by the time we get to the Deathly Hallows, the actor of Harry is going to be in his 30s. They need to make a change. Yes, the writers are to blame for most of the season's failures, but HBO is doing just as much damage with its pathetic approach to streaming. Anyway, what do you think about The Last of Us Season 2? Do you like it more than me, or are you just as disappointed as I am? Let me know down below. Tune in next week where we'll be looking at The Acolyte 1 year later. I'm sure that'll be fun. Thank you everyone so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to unite the Claude Squad, and I'll see you guys next time.